Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific car review, of course from the 1.13 patch, even though we've gone beyond that now with 1.14, and this is a car which a lot of people were saying, oh, you need to drive this, you need to check it out, it's such a good little car, and of course that's not really new news. If you've just joined the franchise then it might seem to be, but this car was featured before, and even before it became a premium, we had it way back in Gran Turismo 4 even, and there were always two Alpines in particular. I was more of a fan of the other one, the A310 I think it was, which was kind of the predecessor to the A610, you could say, certainly in terms of its style. It looks a lot more similar to that, what would become essentially a Porsche level machine. This one though is the much more famous car. And of course they had Le Mans variations of this shape, you've got rally variations which are super well known, probably the most iconic car that the brand has ever made, and then you've got the road car, which is this one. Now on GT6 we had this in premium and non-premium form, we discussed both of those in this same series, so if you want to check those out you can click through to the playlist at the end. But for now, what about this one? How does it feel? What's new? What's perhaps better? What could even be worse? Well, in some ways it's a car which carries over a lot of its raw potential, but I would actually say that in a similar method to the Audi R8, ironically given that they share virtually nothing in common, this car has benefited from the new N-Class system, because on Gran Turismo 6 of course we had the PP system, performance points, and the problem with that system is that it would often inaccurately make cars that were just lightweight have a much higher PP level than they should have actually had. The Red Bull Junior syndrome, as I used to call it, a car which just doesn't have the power, but because it's so light, they make it way too high. And that was always an issue which all of the Alpines could fall into. You do relatively small amounts of tuning to them. It's only, what, around 260 horsepower car fully tuned anyway, which certainly isn't going to scare a supercar on paper, and yet the PP level will be very, very high, like full-on sports car territory up against cars which at that same level could easily have 3, 4, 5, sometimes even more 100 horsepower. Now though, now that it's done on the power system, that is where a car like this really works well, in the exact same way as the Audi R8. Now with this car it's not quite as high as the Audi, fully tuned you're looking at again around 260 horsepower, but that's not the thing with this car, because this is one of those vehicles which works so well at the level which it essentially is stock, which is 138 horsepower, which doesn't sound that impressive, neither does 114 pound-feet of torque, but what it can do with those specs is always what has made the Alpine sports cars so good. They are excellent for technical circuits, and even though the handling takes a little bit of getting used to with the rear engine rear-wheel drive layout, kind of like a little French Porsche in some ways, or Porsche was like a little German Alpine if you want to look at it that way around, it's a car which in the N100 category, the N200 category, it really does deliver a punch. In fact, in the N100 class, there's not much else that can keep up with this. You've either got something like a Samba bus, which of course doesn't stand a chance, or you could try detuning something like a hot hatch, which again you can do, but it's never as much of an advantage to detune a more powerful car as it is to tune up a lower one, because just inherently you're working against the car's own benefit. By restricting the engine and restricting the power, you're literally suffocating the vehicle, whereas with a lower car, it may not have the raw spec range that a more powerful vehicle will have, but if you tune them both to something like N200, this car's working essentially at its peak, whereas something else that you detune, like a sports car or a hot hatch, is working less than it should be. It's working less efficiently and struggling more. And often, they'll be a lot heavier as well, and this car only weighs 715 kilos stock. And again, of course, you can drop that lower and it doesn't even affect the class, so you might as well do it. Now, as you can see in the video, it is fairly tail happy. It certainly likes to slide around, especially on lower level tyres, anything lower than race tyres basically, and it's nothing that you can't tune and improve. But even if you don't choose to, and you just let it go sideways, you can still have a ton of fun with it and still remain competitive. That's the great thing about an Alpine. Those who do love them, and they really do have their superfans, you can have a ton of fun and be competitive. And that's something which I bring up a lot on the channel. If you can find a car that not only does the job, but that you enjoy using, well, that's infinitely better than having just some clinical machine that does the job but it's boring, will just bore you out of your mind. Well, of course, it's always going to be better to find something that you love as well, and 9 times out of 10, you'll find that that will be quicker if you do love the car. That's certainly the case for me with especially LMP cars, something like the Panoz LMP or the Cadillac on Forza. They're categorically not as quick, and yet I would often beat people using better cars because of the love that I had for them. And of course, experience always factors in as well. This car is reasonably expensive, 100 grand, so you could wait to win it, but if you are a classic fan, and especially if you plan to do lower level online racing, say N100, N200, then it's definitely worth a look. And to be honest, the only potential downside to this car is that the rating system in the game, and this isn't the car's fault, it's the game's fault and the makers. The N-Class system, as we've discussed numerous times before, is a great system in some ways. It allows cars like this to be much more OP, but that's also the inherent problem. It makes certain cars more OP than they should be and has glaring inaccuracies. And in the case of this car, that can be clearly seen from taking this up against something like a tuned Samba Boss. That car's never going to stand a chance, so that's inherently not really that fair. And even in higher categories you can see that same issue again. For instance, in N700 you could have a Hellcat Charger or a modified Viper. How is that fair? One is a stock super saloon and one's a heavily modified super sports car. What kind of chance does the sedan have? Not saying that it's slow, but it's just not really a feasible method all the time. Now, of course, PP has its own drawbacks as well, but still, it's certainly a method which needs a bit more refining, and balance of performance isn't really enough for that. But if you do like classics, if you already liked Alpine in the game, definitely check this one out. And that's it for this pick overall, so of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.